Effective immediately, the board has appointed me as the new Chief Operations Officer, I announced, watching my husband's face drain of all color. Just 4 weeks ago, Jack had been plotting to divorce me with his secretary. Now I was officially his superior at the pharmaceutical company where he'd worked for 15 years. The boardroom fell silent as all eyes darted between us, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Rebecca Mitchell. 3 months ago, my life seemed picture perfect. At least that's what my Instagram followers thought. I had a thriving career as a management consultant, a gorgeous home in Seattle's Queen Anne neighborhood, and what I believed was a solid 12-year marriage to Jack, a marketing executive at Horizon Pharmaceuticals. The rain tapped gently against the windows of our craftsman-style home as I bustled around the kitchen, putting final touches on the hors d'oeuvres for my promotion party. After years of hard work, I'd finally made partner at my consulting firm, and we were celebrating with close friends and colleagues. Jack had insisted on hosting at our home instead of the restaurant I'd initially suggested. "It'll be more personal," he'd said with that charming smile, the one that had made me fall for him when we met in grad school. I should have recognized the calculation behind his eyes. "Have you seen Jack?" I asked my best friend Olivia, who was sipping Chardonnay by the fireplace. The party was in full swing, soft jazz playing, laughter emanating from groups scattered around our open-concept main floor. Olivia frowned slightly, her dark curls bouncing as she glanced around the room. "I think he went upstairs with Melissa, probably discussing some work emergency." Melissa Kane, Jack's executive assistant of just 7 months. Young, ambitious, with an MBA from Stanford and a wardrobe that suggested someone was helping with her entry-level salary. I'd noticed how she looked at Jack during the company holiday party, but had dismissed it as professional admiration. After all, Jack was Horizon's rising star, rumored to be next in line for the COO position. "On the night of your promotion?" Olivia's tone carried a note of concern that made my stomach clench. That's a bit much, even for Jack. "Something?" in her voice made me set down my wine glass. I'd been ignoring signs for months. The late-night texts, the sudden business trips, the password change on his laptop. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be about us, about celebrating my achievement. "I'll go find them," I said, forcing a smile. "Make sure everyone's getting enough wine." The stairs creaked slightly under my heels. As I ascended to the second floor, past framed photos of our travels, hiking in New Zealand, wine tasting in Tuscany, scuba diving in Bali. Each image captured moments I thought were anchored in genuine happiness. As I approached Jack's office, I heard murmured voices behind the partially closed door. A sliver of light spilled onto the hallway carpet. "The timing works out perfectly." Melissa's voice was confident, professional. "Once Rebecca receives the partnership benefits next month, the assets will be at their maximum value for the settlement." I froze, my hand gripping the doorframe. "You're sure about this timeline?" Jack's voice, the strategic one he used when planning marketing campaigns. "Absolutely," Melissa replied. "I've analyzed everything. Her promotion actually helps us. She'll be busy with the new responsibilities, traveling more. She won't notice the account transfers until it's too late." I inched closer, peering through the gap in the door. They sat on opposite sides of Jack's desk, documents spread between them. Not touching, not showing any physical affection. This wasn't a passionate affair. It was worse. It was calculated conspiracy. "And the offshore accounts?" Jack asked, flipping through what looked like bank statements. "All set up." Melissa reached across to point at something on a document. "The Cayman structure is completely untraceable. Even with her financial background, she'll never find these assets." My knees weakened. The crystal wine glass in my hand suddenly felt like it might shatter in my grip. You're brilliant, Jack said, leaning back in his chair. I couldn't have planned this without you. What about the prenup? Melissa asked, gathering some papers into a folder. Jack laughed, that confident chuckle I'd once found so appealing. It's solid. I had my cousin draft it, remember? Rebecca will walk away with the house and not much else. Once I secure the COO position next month, we'll be set. Just in time for Bora Bora. Melissa smiled, and there it was, a look that confirmed they were more than just conspirators. The board meeting is on the 15th, Jack said. I'll serve her the papers the next day. Clean break. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding so violently I was sure they would hear it. 12 years of marriage, our life together. All while he'd been planning an exit strategy, siphoning away assets, positioning himself for a promotion, and planning a getaway with his secretary. I made it to the guest bathroom before my legs gave out. Sinking onto the closed toilet lid, I fought to control my breathing. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger. Her carefully applied makeup now seemed like a mask. Her styled hair a costume for a role she didn't know she was playing. Olivia found me 10 minutes later, concern etched on her face. One look and she knew something was terribly wrong. Rebecca? What happened? I told her everything in a strange, detached voice that didn't sound like my own. As the words came out, something inside me shifted. The initial shock and pain were being pushed aside by something else, something cold and focused. That calculating bastard, Olivia whispered. What are you going to do? I stood up, smoothing my black cocktail dress. First, we're going back to the party. I need to pretend everything is normal. And then, meeting my own eyes in the mirror, I saw a hardness there I hadn't known I possessed. And then I'm going to take everything from him, starting with that COO position. Olivia's eyes widened. How? I'm a partner at one of the top management consulting firms in the country, I said, reapplying my lipstick with a steady hand. Horizon Pharmaceuticals has been trying to recruit me for years. As I fixed my makeup, a plan began to crystallize. Jack had taught me something valuable over our years together. In business, information is power. And I had just gained the ultimate information advantage. Help me get through this party, I told Olivia. Tomorrow, we go to war. When we returned downstairs, Jack and Melissa had rejoined the party, standing carefully apart from each other. Jack raised his glass when he saw me. To my brilliant wife, he announced to the gathered crowd. Congratulations on making partner, darling. I always knew you'd get there. I smiled back, clinking my fresh glass of champagne against his. Thank you, honey. Here's to big achievements. And what comes next? Let him think he had the upper hand. Let him believe his plan was flawless. While he was plotting my humiliation, he'd given me the most valuable gift of all, advance warning. The party continued around me, but everything had changed. Each laugh felt hollow, each congratulation tainted. Beneath the pain and betrayal, however, something else was growing. Determination. Jack thought he had written the perfect ending to our marriage. He was about to learn that this was just the beginning, and I would write the final chapter. The next morning, while Jack was in the shower, I photographed every document in his home office safe. The combination was our anniversary date, another bit of irony in his web of betrayal. Inside, I found account statements for banks I'd never heard of, property documents for a vacation home in Hawaii I'd never seen, and detailed notes on the divorce timeline. I forwarded everything to my personal email, then carefully replaced each document exactly as I'd found it. When Jack left for his morning run, another recent habit that conveniently coincided with Melissa's morning yoga sessions at a nearby park, I called Olivia. I need a lawyer, I said. Not just any lawyer. I need the best. Olivia didn't hesitate. My cousin Claire. She specializes in high-asset divorces, especially ones involving financial fraud. She's a shark. 2 hours. Later, I sat in Claire Hamilton's downtown office, laying out the evidence I'd gathered. Her expression remained professional, but I caught the flash of disgust as she reviewed the photos of Jack's hidden accounts. "Classic dissipation of marital assets," she said, typing notes on her laptop. "The offshore accounts, the timing with your promotion. This is premeditated financial fraud." "What do we do?" I asked. Claire leaned forward, her gray suit impeccable, her expression determined. "First, we document everything without alerting him. Second, we secure your assets. Third," she smiled slightly, "we develop a counter-strategy that he won't see coming." I nodded, feeling the first glimmer of control returning. "There's something else. Jack is positioned to become the new COO at Horizon Pharmaceuticals. The board votes in 3 weeks. And this matters because Horizon has been trying to hire me as a consultant for years. Their operations need a complete overhaul. Their CEO, Daniel Weber, has personally reached out multiple times." Claire raised an eyebrow. "You're thinking of taking a job at your husband's company while planning to divorce him?" "Not just any job," I clarified. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I'm thinking of taking his job." Claire's professional demeanor cracked as she let out a surprised laugh. Bold, very bold, but also complex from a legal standpoint. "Tell me more." Over the next hour, we mapped out a strategy that would protect my assets while positioning me for what came next. Claire would quietly file for divorce, citing financial fraud, but the papers would be sealed and not served until we were ready. Meanwhile, I would reach out to Daniel Weber about the consulting opportunity I'd previously declined. "Remember," Claire cautioned as our meeting concluded, "absolute discretion is crucial. If Jack suspects anything, he'll accelerate his timeline." That afternoon, I sent a carefully worded email to Daniel Weber, expressing interest in discussing the consulting opportunity. His response came within minutes, inviting me to lunch the following day. At home, I maintained a perfect facade. I kissed Jack goodbye in the morning, discussed dinner plans in the evening, and played the role of devoted wife while systematically preparing for his destruction. The cognitive dissonance was stunning, sleeping next to a man who was actively plotting against me, sharing meals with someone who had already emotionally and financially abandoned our marriage. My lunch with Daniel Weber was set at an upscale restaurant overlooking Puget Sound. As CEO of Horizon Pharmaceuticals, Daniel had a reputation for being brilliant but impatient with underperformance. His company had grown rapidly, but operational inefficiencies were threatening their newest product launches. "Rebecca, I was thrilled to get your email," he said after we ordered. "Frankly, I'd given up hope of luring you away from Stevens and Marsh." I smiled, projecting confidence I didn't entirely feel. Sometimes the right opportunity comes along at the right moment. And what's changed to make this the right moment? This was the tricky part. I needed to be honest enough to be credible without revealing my true motivations. "I've reached a point in my career where I'm looking for a new challenge," I said. "Making partner was a goal, but now I'm more interested in applying my expertise in a more focused way. Healthcare has always fascinated me, and Horizon's innovation pipeline is impressive." Daniel nodded, seeming satisfied with my answer. "We've been struggling with operational inefficiencies. Our last 3 product launches were delayed. With the Neurolex rollout coming up, we can't afford another setback." I knew about Neurolex, a breakthrough treatment for Parkinson's that represented billions in potential revenue. It was also the project Jack had been leading the marketing strategy for. "I've actually analyzed Horizon's last few product launches," I said, pulling a slim folder from my briefcase. I had prepared this analysis months ago when Daniel had first approached me. "I identified several critical bottlenecks in your process." Daniel's eyes widened as he reviewed my assessment. "This is remarkably accurate. How did you..." It's what I do, I replied simply. Find problems, develop solutions. By the end of lunch, Daniel was no longer offering me a consulting position. He was offering me a job as Vice President of Operations, reporting directly to the COO, who would have been Jack after the upcoming board meeting. There's one complication, I said, deciding honesty was necessary. My husband works for Horizon. Daniel waved dismissively. Jack's in marketing, you'd be in operations. Different departments, different buildings even. As long as neither of you directly reports to the other, HR won't see a conflict. I smiled, knowing what he didn't, that this arrangement would be very temporary. When can you start? Daniel asked. Immediately, I replied. But I'd like to keep this confidential until my first day. I need to properly transition my clients at Stevens and Marsh. Daniel agreed, and we shook hands on the deal. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived a carefully compartmentalized life. At my consulting firm, I arranged for the transition of my clients. At home, I played the role of unsuspecting wife. And in secret meetings with Claire, I built a case against Jack that was growing stronger by the day. We've identified 6 offshore accounts, Claire informed me during one of our meetings, all established within the last 8 months. The pattern of transfers suggests he's been moving approximately $12,000 per month, just under the reporting threshold. What about the Hawaii property? I asked. Purchased through an LLC registered to Melissa Kane's brother, Claire confirmed, but funded entirely from your joint investment account. Each discovery strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about a husband having an affair. This was calculated theft of our shared financial life. Claire had also discovered something else. Jack had used his position at Horizon to grant Melissa stock options normally reserved for senior employees, backdating the paperwork to make it appear legitimate. That's securities fraud, Claire noted. A criminal offense. The pieces were falling into place faster than I'd anticipated. My start date at Horizon was set for Monday, 3 days before the board meeting where Jack expected to be named COO. On my last day at Stevens and Marsh, my colleagues threw a farewell party. Though I hadn't disclosed where I was going, the rumors were that I'd been poached by a major client. Jack attended, playing the supportive husband perfectly. So proud of you, babe, he said, his arm around my waist for the benefit of my colleagues. Whatever this new opportunity is, you're going to crush it. I smiled up at him, wondering how I'd ever found his practiced sincerity convincing. You have no idea. The weekend before I started at Horizon, Jack was unusually attentive, bringing me coffee in bed, suggesting dinner at my favorite restaurant. It was almost as if he was feeling guilty about what he was planning. Or perhaps it was just another performance, ensuring I would be caught completely off guard when he served the divorce papers after securing his promotion. Monday morning arrived with a sense of electric anticipation. I dressed carefully in a navy power suit, a subtle armor for the battle ahead. Big day at the firm? Jack asked, noticing my formal attire. Something like that, I replied, kissing his cheek before heading out. The Horizon Pharmaceuticals campus sprawled across several modern buildings in Seattle's biotech corridor. I parked in the visitor space, savoring the knowledge that Jack's car was somewhere in the executive lot, its owner completely unaware of what was coming. Daniel Weber met me in the lobby, enthusiastically introducing me to key team members as we toured the facilities. By mid-morning, I was settled in my new office, just down the hall from the CFO and 1 floor below the executive suite where Jack worked. At noon, an all-staff email went out announcing my appointment as Vice President of Operations. I imagined Jack's reaction when he read it, the momentary confusion followed by panic. How would this affect his carefully laid plans? Would he accelerate the divorce timeline? I didn't have to wonder long. At 12:37, my office phone rang. Rebecca, we need to talk. Jack's voice was tightly controlled. What is this about you working at Horizon? Surprise, I replied calmly. Daniel's been recruiting me for months. I finally decided to accept. And you didn't think to discuss this with me? It all happened rather quickly, I said, echoing the excuses he'd given for his own late nights and unexpected trips. We can talk about it tonight. Jack insisted on lunch, suggesting a cafe far from the Horizon campus. I agreed, curious, to see how he would handle this unexpected development. When I arrived, Jack was already seated, his expression a mixture of confusion and calculation. I could almost see him reassessing his strategy, trying to determine how my new position affected his plans. This is quite a surprise, he said after we ordered. I thought you were happy at Stevens and Marsh. I was looking for a new challenge, I replied. Horizon's operational issues are fascinating. And working at the same company as your husband doesn't concern you? I tilted my head innocently. Should it? We're in different departments. Besides, I thought you'd be pleased. Now we can carpool. Jack forced a smile, but I could see the tension in his jaw. Of course, it's just unexpected. Sometimes the best opportunities come when you least expect them, I said, echoing the platitudes he'd used whenever explaining his late nights with the team. Throughout lunch, Jack probed for information. How long had I been talking with Daniel? What exactly would my role entail had I met with the board? I answered each question with practiced vagueness, revealing nothing of importance while observing his growing discomfort. As we parted in the parking lot, Jack attempted to reassert control. We should celebrate properly tonight. I'll make reservations at Canlis. Perfect, I agreed, knowing it would be our last dinner as a married couple. I have a few meetings this afternoon, but I'll be home by 6. Back in my office, I had an email waiting from Claire. Everything is ready. Papers filed. Judge briefed. On financial evidence. Green light whenever you're ready. I forwarded her the most recent company organizational chart, highlighting Jack and Melissa's positions. Claire had already prepared an anonymous tip to Horizon's compliance department about the backdated stock options, a tip that would hit their inbox tomorrow morning, just as I was implementing the next phase of my plan. At 3 p.m., I had my scheduled meeting with Daniel and the CFO to discuss the operational review I'd been hired to conduct. I presented my preliminary findings, a damning assessment of inefficiencies that traced back to the marketing department's failure to coordinate with production. These delays have cost approximately $34 million in the last year alone, I concluded, showing a graph of opportunity costs. And unless we restructure before the Neurolex launch, we're looking at potential losses of over $100 million. Daniel looked grim. The board meeting is in 2 days. They're expecting updates on Neurolex readiness. I can prepare a detailed presentation, I offered, including recommendations for immediate restructuring. Do it, Daniel said firmly. This can't wait. That evening at Canlis, overlooking Lake Union as the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jack was back to playing the devoted husband. He ordered an expensive bottle of champagne, toasting to new beginnings. If only he knew how prophetic those words would be. I have a surprise for you, he said midway through dinner. I've booked us a trip to Bora Bora next month, just the 2 of us. After the board meeting, I realized, after he received the promotion he believed was certain. He would take me to a romantic location, serve the divorce papers, and fly home alone while I was stranded in paradise, reeling from the betrayal. How thoughtful, I said, clinking my glass against his. I can't wait. The next morning, Horizon's compliance department received the anonymous tip about irregularities in the executive stock option program. By noon, Melissa Kane had been called into a closed-door meeting. By 3 p.m., she was being escorted from the building, her personal items in a cardboard box. Jack appeared in my office doorway moments later, his face ashen. Did you hear about Melissa? He asked, trying to sound merely concerned rather than panicked. I looked up from my computer with practiced surprise. Your assistant? No, what happened? Some kind of HR issue, he said vaguely. Very sudden. I returned to my work. How unfortunate, especially with the board meeting tomorrow. Will that affect your presentation? No, Jack said quickly. Everything's ready. What he didn't know was that I had already met privately with 2 board members, sharing my operational analysis and its direct connection to marketing's mismanagement. Without explicitly naming Jack, I had made it clear that the current marketing leadership was a significant part of Horizon's problems. That night, Jack worked late in his home office, frantically adjusting his presentation in Melissa's absence. I used the opportunity to place the final pieces of evidence Claire had prepared in strategic locations, printouts of offshore account transfers in his desk drawer, emails between him and Melissa discussing the divorce in his deleted items folder, that wouldn't stay deleted, and a brochure for the Hawaii property in his briefcase. The morning of the board meeting, Jack left early, determined to make final preparations. I followed an hour later, a separate portfolio tucked under my arm containing my own presentation and the divorce papers Claire had prepared. The Horizon. Boardroom was an impressive space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. I arrived just as the meeting was beginning, taking a seat near the CEO as befitted my new role. Jack faltered slightly when he saw me, obviously not expecting my presence at this crucial meeting. The board chair, Eleanor Montgomery, called the meeting to order, beginning with standard updates before moving to the critical agenda item, Neurolex. Launch readiness. Jack's presentation went first. He was smooth, confident, showcasing marketing's readiness while glossing over the operational delays. Under normal circumstances, it would have been convincing. But these were not normal circumstances. When Daniel introduced me to present the operational review, Jack's expression shifted from confidence to wariness. And as I methodically outlined the systemic failures, connecting them directly to marketing's mismanagement, wariness turned to alarm. As you can see from these metrics, I concluded, the current marketing strategy is fundamentally misaligned with operational capabilities. Without immediate restructuring, Neurolex will face the same costly delays as our previous 3 launches. Eleanor Montgomery frowned. This is deeply concerning, especially given the projections we just heard from marketing. Mr. Mitchell, how do you respond to these findings? Jack tried to recover, suggesting that operations simply didn't understand marketing's innovative approach. But the damage was done. The board members were exchanging concerned glances. Then Daniel delivered the final blow. In light of these findings, and some irregularities recently discovered by compliance, I need to recommend a leadership change. The room fell silent. I propose that Rebecca Mitchell be appointed Chief Operations Officer with immediate oversight of both operations and marketing to ensure alignment for the Neurolex launch. Several board members nodded in agreement. Eleanor called for a vote. It was unanimous. Effective immediately, the board has appointed me as the new Chief Operations Officer, I announced, watching my husband's face drain of all color. Just 4 weeks ago, Jack had been plotting to divorce me with his secretary. Now I was officially his superior at the pharmaceutical company where he'd worked for 15 years. As the meeting adjourned, Jack approached me, his expression a mixture of shock and fury. "What the hell was that?" he hissed. I smiled pleasantly, aware of the board members still within earshot. "That was me doing my job. We should discuss the restructuring of your department this afternoon. Shall we say 3 p.m. in my office?" Jack followed me into the hallway, grabbing my arm once we were alone. "This isn't over." "Actually," I replied, removing his hand and pressing the divorce papers into his chest. "It is." "You've been served, Jack. I suggest you read these carefully, especially the parts about financial fraud and securities violations." His face went from anger to shock to fear in the span of seconds as he flipped through the document. You knew? How long? Since my promotion party, I said quietly. I heard everything. You and Melissa planning it all. The offshore accounts. The Hawaii property, serving me papers in Bora Bora after you secured the COO position. Jack's shoulders sagged as the full implications hit him. Rebecca, we can talk about this. We are talking about it. And as your new boss, I should inform you that your position is being eliminated in the restructuring. Your personal items will be packed and sent to your lawyer's office. Don't bother going back to your desk. Your access has already been revoked. As if on cue, 2 security officers approached. Mr. Mitchell, we need to escort you from the building. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Jack? I canceled the Bora Bora reservation. But don't worry, I made a new one. I hear Hawaii is lovely this time of year. I might check out that beachfront property you bought with our investment funds. As the security team led him toward the elevator, I returned to my new office, the corner office that should have been his. Through the glass walls, I could see Daniel speaking with the board chair, both of them nodding appreciatively in my direction. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Judge froze all accounts. Hawaii property secured. Well done. I sat down at my new desk, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Jack had spent months plotting what he thought would be my downfall. Instead, he'd orchestrated his own. Sometimes life hands you unexpected betrayal. And sometimes, if you're smart and strategic, you can turn that betrayal into the greatest opportunity of your life. As the newly appointed COO of Horizon Pharmaceuticals, I had a company to transform. And as a soon-to-be divorced woman, I had a life to rebuild, on my own terms. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was more than ready. After all, I'd just survived the most ruthless business negotiation of my life, against the man who'd taught me everything I knew about strategic thinking. Except apparently, rule number 1, never underestimate your opponent. Several board members nodded in agreement. Eleanor called for a vote. It was unanimous. Effective immediately, the board has appointed me as the new Chief Operations Officer, I announced, watching Jack's face drain of all color. Just 4 weeks ago, he had been plotting to divorce me with his secretary. Now, I was officially his superior at the pharmaceutical company where he'd worked for 15 years. As the meeting adjourned, Jack approached me, his expression a mixture of shock and fury. What the hell was that? He hissed. I smiled pleasantly, aware of the board members still within earshot. That was me doing my job. We should discuss the restructuring of your department this afternoon. Shall we say 3 p.m.? In my office? Jack followed me into the hallway, grabbing my arm once we were alone. This isn't over. Actually, I replied, removing his hand and pressing the divorce papers into his chest. It is. You've been served, Jack. I suggest you read these carefully, especially the parts about financial fraud and securities violations. His face went from anger to shock to fear in the span of seconds as he flipped through the document. You knew? How long? Since my promotion party, I said quietly. I heard everything. You and Melissa planning it all. The offshore accounts, the Hawaii property, serving me papers in Bora Bora after you secured the COO position. Jack's shoulders sagged as the full implications hit him. Rebecca, we can talk about this. We are talking about it. And as your new boss, I should inform you that your position is being eliminated in the restructuring. Your personal items will be packed and sent to your lawyer's office. Don't bother going back to your desk. Your access has already been revoked. As if on cue, 2 security officers approached. Mr. Mitchell, we need to escort you from the building. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Jack? I canceled the Bora Bora reservation. But don't worry, I made a new one. I hear Hawaii is lovely this time of year. I might check out that beachfront property you bought with our investment funds. As the security team led him toward the elevator, I returned to my new office, the corner office that should have been his. Through the glass walls, I could see Daniel speaking with the board chair, both of them nodding appreciatively in my direction. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Judge froze all accounts. Hawaii property secured. Well done. I sat down at my new desk, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Jack had spent months plotting what he thought would be my downfall. Instead, he'd orchestrated his own. Sometimes life hands you unexpected betrayal. And sometimes, if you're smart and strategic, you can turn that betrayal into the greatest opportunity of your life. As the newly appointed COO of Horizon Pharmaceuticals, I had a company to transform, and as a soon-to-be divorced woman, I had a life to rebuild, on my own terms. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was more than ready. After all, I'd just survived the most ruthless business negotiation of my life, against the man who'd taught me everything I knew about strategic thinking. Except, apparently, rule number 1, never underestimate your opponent. Several board members nodded in agreement. Eleanor called for a vote. It was unanimous. Effective immediately, the board has appointed me as the new Chief Operations Officer, I announced, watching Jack's face drain of all color. Just 4 weeks ago, he had been plotting to divorce me with his secretary. Now, I was officially his superior at the pharmaceutical company where he'd worked for 15 years. As the meeting adjourned, Jack approached me, his expression a mixture of shock and fury. "What the hell was that?" he hissed. I smiled pleasantly, aware of the board members still within earshot. "That was me doing my job. We should discuss the restructuring of your department this afternoon. Shall we say 3 p.m. in my office?" Jack followed me into the hallway, grabbing my arm once we were alone. "This isn't over." "Actually," I replied, removing his hand and pressing the divorce papers into his chest. "It is. You've been served, Jack. I suggest you read these carefully, especially the parts about financial fraud and securities violations." His face went from anger to shock to fear in the span of seconds as he flipped through the document. "You knew? How long?" "Since my promotion party," I said quietly. "I heard everything. You and Melissa planning it all. The offshore accounts, the Hawaii property, serving me papers in Bora Bora after you secured the COO position." Jack's shoulders sagged as the full implications hit him. "Rebecca, we can talk about this." "We are talking about it. And as your new boss, I should inform you that your position is being eliminated in the restructuring. Your personal items will be packed and sent to your lawyer's office. Don't bother going back to your desk. Your access has already been revoked." As if on cue, 2 security officers approached. "Mr. Mitchell, we need to escort you from the building." I turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Jack?" "I canceled the Bora Bora reservation. But don't worry, I made a new one. I hear Hawaii is lovely this time of year. I might check out that beachfront property you bought with our investment funds." As the security team led him toward the elevator, I returned to my new office, the corner office that should have been his. Through the glass walls, I could see Daniel speaking with the board chair, both of them nodding appreciatively in my direction. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Judge froze all accounts. Hawaii property secured. Well done. I sat down at my new desk, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Jack had spent months plotting what he thought would be my downfall. Instead, he'd orchestrated his own. The days following Jack's dramatic departure from Horizon were a whirlwind of activity. My team worked around the clock to prepare for the Neurolex launch, implementing the operational changes I'd outlined in my presentation. The marketing department, now without Jack's leadership, needed immediate restructuring. Daniel gave me full authority to make necessary personnel changes. My first decision was to promote Thomas Chen, a talented marketing director who had worked under Jack for years. During our initial meeting, Thomas confessed his frustrations with Jack's management style. He took credit for everyone else's ideas, Thomas explained, and made decisions based on what would boost his profile rather than what was best for the products. That changes now, I assured him. I need a marketing lead who prioritizes collaboration and transparent communication. Are you that person? Thomas straightened in his chair. Absolutely. I've been waiting for this opportunity for 3 years. With Thomas heading marketing and my operational reforms in place, the company began to transform. Weekly cross-departmental meetings eliminated the silos that had caused previous launch delays. Data-driven decision-making replaced the gut-feeling approach Jack had favored. Meanwhile, the legal implications of Jack's actions continued to unfold. Claire kept me updated on the proceedings with regular briefings. The SEC has opened a formal investigation into the backdated stock options, she informed me during one of our meetings. Melissa is cooperating, providing evidence in exchange. For leniency. What about Jack? I asked, curious rather than concerned. Still denying everything, Claire replied with a knowing smile. Claims he had no knowledge of the offshore accounts or the property transfers. Unfortunately for him, his digital footprint suggests otherwise. The judge overseeing our divorce had already ruled in my favor regarding the financial aspects. The Hawaii property would be sold, with all proceeds returning to our marital assets. The offshore accounts had been frozen, their contents to be repatriated and divided, though divided was perhaps generous, as the court had awarded me 90% of the hidden funds due to Jack's fraudulent actions. But the professional consequences for Jack were potentially more severe than the financial ones. The securities violations could result in civil penalties, industry bans, and even criminal charges if the SEC determined the fraud was significant enough. How are you holding up with all this? Olivia asked one evening as we shared dinner. At my temporary apartment. I'd moved out of our shared home the weekend after the board meeting, leaving Jack to face the emptiness of the space we'd once filled together. Surprisingly well, I admitted. The work keeps me focused, and every day brings new evidence that I made the right decision. Not just the right decision, Olivia corrected, the most badass decision possible. You didn't just leave him, you replaced him. I smiled, appreciating her enthusiasm. It wasn't about revenge, though. It was about justice. Justice with a side of karmic retribution. Olivia raised her wine glass. I'm here for it. 6 weeks after assuming the COO role, I presented the quarterly results to the board. The numbers spoke for themselves. Operational efficiency up 32%. Pre-launch milestones for Neurolex achieved 2 weeks ahead of schedule, and projected first-year sales revised upward by $400 million. Impressive work, Rebecca, Eleanor commented. After the presentation, the board made the right decision. Thank you, I replied, but this is just the beginning. We have structural issues that require deeper reforms if we want to maintain this trajectory. You have our full support, she assured me. Whatever resources you need. That endorsement allowed me to implement the next phase of my vision. For Horizon, a complete reorganization of the research and development pipeline, enhanced integration between scientific innovation and market analysis, and a new approach to talent development that emphasized collaboration over competition. The first true test came with the Neurolex launch. The product represented over 40% of Horizon's projected revenue for the coming year, and its success or failure would define my leadership in the eyes of the industry. The launch day arrived with the nervous energy that accompanies any major product release. I gathered the core team in the conference room, where monitors displayed real-time data from distribution centers and initial orders. This is what we've been working toward, I told them. Not just a product launch, but the demonstration of a new operational approach. Win or lose, we do it together. By midday, the numbers were clear. Neurolex was on track to exceed even our revised projections. Hospitals and specialty clinics were placing orders at unprecedented rates. Pharmaceutical distributors were requesting accelerated shipments, and The medical community was responding positively to the clinical data our scientific team had so meticulously compiled. That evening, as the team celebrated with champagne and catered dinner in the office, Daniel pulled me aside. "You know, when I hired you, I thought I was getting an exceptional operations executive," he said. "I didn't realize I was getting a transformational leader." "The company was ready for change," I replied modestly. "I just provided the direction." "The board is impressed. There's already talk about future opportunities." His meaningful look suggested something significant. "CEO opportunities, potentially, when I retire in a few years." The idea sent a surge of excitement through me, from consultant to COO to potential CEO, all because I'd overheard a conversation that was meant to destroy me. As the Neurolex launch success became industry news, I received an unexpected email from Ted Lawson, Jack's former mentor and the managing partner at Harrison & Palmer, the marketing consultancy where Jack had landed a mid-level position after leaving Horizon. "I'd like to discuss a sensitive matter regarding Jack Mitchell," the email stated. "Could we meet privately?" Curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to breakfast at a discreet hotel restaurant downtown. Ted arrived punctually, his expression grave as he shook my hand. "Thank you for meeting me, Rebecca. I'll get straight to the point. Jack has been claiming that his departure from Horizon was due to corporate politics, specifically that his wife manipulated her way into a position of power to force him out." I kept my expression neutral. "Is that why he's now working for your firm at a fraction of his former salary?" Ted grimaced. He presented himself as a victim of circumstance, and I gave him the benefit of the doubt based on our history. But last week, we received an anonymous package containing documents that suggest a very different story. Offshore accounts, property transfers, backdated stock options. "Sounds concerning," I replied carefully. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because we're terminating his employment, and I wanted to warn you." He's becoming increasingly bitter about how things turned out. When he joined us, he was contrite, focused on rebuilding. But lately, he's been making concerning statements about settling scores. I appreciated the warning but wasn't particularly worried. Jack had always been more calculating than confrontational. His strength was in long-term planning, not emotional outbursts. "Thank you for the heads up," I told Ted. "But I suspect his threats are just that, threats. His legal position is precarious enough without adding harassment to the mix." Nevertheless, I informed building security to be vigilant, and Claire recommended a temporary restraining order as a precautionary measure. The judge granted it immediately. Given the documentation of financial fraud and Ted's statement about Jack's concerning behavior. 3 months after the Neurolex launch, with the product exceeding all sales projections, I finally allowed myself a weekend off. The Hawaii property had sold, and I decided to use a small portion of my share to treat Olivia and myself to a spa weekend at the Salish Lodge overlooking Snoqualmie Falls. "You realize this is the first time you've taken more than a day off since this whole thing started?" Olivia pointed out as we relaxed in the hot tub, glasses of Prosecco in hand. "There's been a lot to do," I replied, feeling the tension in my shoulders finally begin to release. "Restructuring a company while dismantling a marriage is time-consuming. And now? What's next for Rebecca Mitchell, corporate warrior queen?" I laughed at her dramatic title. "Professionally, continuing to build on our success. The board is already talking about succession planning, with me as a potential CEO candidate when Daniel retires." "And personally?" That was the harder question. The betrayal had left its mark, making me warier, more protective of my independence. Yet I didn't want caution to become isolation. "Learning to trust again, I suppose," I said finally. "Not necessarily in a romantic relationship, but in general. Recognizing that not everyone has hidden agendas." Olivia nodded thoughtfully. "You know, there's something I've been wondering about. That night at your promotion party, what would have happened if you hadn't gone looking for Jack? If you hadn't overheard them?" The question sent a chill through me despite the heat of the water. What if, indeed? I would have continued in blissful ignorance until the moment Jack served me divorce papers in Bora Bora. By then, the offshore accounts would have been firmly established, the Hawaii property secured in Melissa's brother's name, and my partnership, benefits siphoned away. I would have been blindsided, I admitted, and given how meticulously they'd planned everything, I might have lost a lot more than just my marriage. Fate has a strange way of intervening, Olivia mused. One decision, to go looking for your husband, changed everything. That night, as I lay in the luxurious hotel bed, I reflected on Olivia's observation. So much of life hinged on small moments, chance decisions, fortuitous timing. Had I chosen to send someone else to find Jack that night? Or had I arrived at his study door a few minutes earlier or later, my entire future might have unfolded differently. The realization wasn't frightening. It was liberating. We couldn't control every variable in life, but we could control our responses to what we discovered. I had chosen action over victimhood, strategy over emotional reaction, and that choice had made all the difference. Back at Horizon on Monday morning, I dove into preparations for our next major initiative, the acquisition of a promising biotech startup specializing in gene therapy treatments. The due diligence process was intensive, requiring detailed analysis of their research pipeline, intellectual property portfolio, and regulatory compliance history. During a late evening reviewing acquisition documents, my office phone rang. The caller ID showed Horizon's main security desk. Ms. Mitchell, there's a Jack Mitchell attempting to enter the building. He's claiming he has an appointment with you. My pulse quickened. I have no appointments scheduled. Please do not allow him entry. Understood. He seems agitated. Should we contact the police? Yes, I decided instantly. And please send security footage of the incident to my email. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with a video attachment. The lobby camera showed Jack arguing with the security officer, gesturing wildly toward the elevators. His appearance was disheveled, a far cry from the polished executive who had once commanded respect throughout the company. After several minutes of heated exchange, he suddenly turned and left, just as a police cruiser pulled up outside. I forwarded the video to Claire with a brief message, restraining order violation? Her response was immediate. Absolutely. I'll file the report first thing tomorrow. The incident rattled me more than I wanted to admit. Not because I feared Jack physically, but because it represented a deterioration I hadn't anticipated. The calculating strategist I'd been married to would never have made such a clumsy public move. This suggested desperation, and desperate people could be unpredictable. The next morning, I received a call from Detective Morgan with the Seattle Police Department. Ms. Mitchell, we're following up on the incident at your workplace last night. Mr. Mitchell was picked up this morning on the restraining order violation. During the arrest, officers found documents in his possession that have raised some concerns. What kind of documents? I asked. Detailed information about your schedule, security access codes to your apartment building, and what appears to be plans to access your personal accounts. We're taking this very seriously. The detective's words sent a chill through me. Jack had moved beyond bitter ex-husband to potential stalker. Thank you for letting me know, I managed to say, my mind racing with implications. We'd like you to come down to the station to make a formal statement, Detective Morgan continued. And in the meantime, I'd strongly advise reviewing your security measures at home and work. After hanging up, I sat motionless in my office chair, absorbing this new reality. The divorce proceedings were nearly complete. The professional battle decisively won, yet Jack seemed unable to accept the outcome. The man who had once plotted my financial ruin was now apparently contemplating something more directly threatening. I called Olivia, who arrived at my office within 30 minutes, her face tight with concern. This is escalating too quickly, she said after I explained the situation. You need to stay with me until they figure out what he was planning. I can't hide, Olivia. I have a company to run. You can run it from anywhere with an internet connection, at least for a few days, until they determine whether to charge him with something more serious than violating the restraining order. Reluctantly, I agreed. We stopped by my apartment to pack essentials, then headed to Olivia's condo in Belltown, where the doorman and secure access provided an additional layer of protection. That evening, as we shared takeout and tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, Claire called with an update. The police are holding Jack on the restraining order violation, but they're building a case for criminal harassment and possibly attempted identity theft based on the documents they found. His lawyer is trying to get him released on bail, but given the nature of the evidence, they may deny it. How did it come to this? I wondered aloud. He was always so rational, so controlled. People show their true nature when they lose everything, Claire replied. Especially when they lose it due to their own actions and can't accept responsibility. Over the next week, I worked remotely from Olivia's condo, maintaining my leadership role through video conferences and secure document sharing. The company continued to function smoothly, a testament to the systems I'd put in place. Detective Morgan called with periodic updates. Jack remained in custody, denied bail due to the seriousness of the new charges and the evidence suggesting he posed a danger. A psychological evaluation had been ordered, the results of which would determine next steps in his case. 10 days after Jack's arrest, I received a call from an unexpected source, Melissa Kane. "Rebecca, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from," she began, her voice subdued. "But after what happened with Jack, I felt I needed to reach out." "I'm listening," I replied neutrally. "I've been cooperating with the SEC investigation, providing everything I know about the accounts and the stock options. But there's something else, something that wasn't directly related to the financial issues but might be relevant now." My interest piqued. "Go on." Jack had a plan for if things went wrong. He called it his scorched earth option. If he couldn't win, he'd make sure no one did. He talked about it a few times when he'd been drinking, but I never took it seriously until I heard about his arrest. "What exactly did this plan involve?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He had information, or claimed to have information, that could damage Horizon's reputation. Clinical trial data that he said had been manipulated, emails suggesting regulatory shortcuts. I don't know if any of it was real or if he fabricated it, but he was convinced it was his insurance policy. The revelation sent my mind racing. If Jack was desperate enough to attempt what sounded like corporate sabotage or whistleblowing based on falsified evidence, the implications for Horizon could be severe. Even if the claims were ultimately disproven, the mere suggestion of impropriety could impact stock prices, regulatory relationships, and public trust. "Thank you for telling me," I said, already formulating my next steps. "I assume you've shared this with the authorities as well?" "Yes, I spoke with Detective Morgan yesterday. I'm trying to make things right, Rebecca. I know it doesn't excuse what we did, but I want you to know I regret my part in it." After ending the call, I immediately contacted Daniel and the company's legal counsel to brief them on this new threat. We needed to review all clinical trial data, regulatory submissions, and internal communications that Jack might have had access to, ensuring everything was above board and properly documented. The next morning, Horizon's legal team assembled in the conference room, along with Daniel, the head of research and development, and our regulatory compliance officer. I shared Melissa's warning, and we began developing a proactive strategy. "First, we need to verify whether there's any truth to Jack's claims," our chief legal officer advised. "If there are legitimate issues, we address them immediately and transparently. If not, we prepare to refute any false allegations quickly and decisively." The audit process was intensive, with teams working around the clock to review years of documentation. After 3 days of exhaustive investigation, the results were clear. All clinical trials had been conducted according to protocol, regulatory, submissions contained accurate data, and while there were occasional procedural oversights, none rose to the level of misconduct. In other words, Daniel summarized, Jack has nothing concrete, but that doesn't mean he can't cause damage with fabricated claims. We need to get ahead of this, I agreed. Prepare a comprehensive transparency report on our clinical and regulatory processes. Not as a reaction to accusations, but as part of our commitment to ethical practices. The team implemented my recommendation, creating a detailed document outlining Horizon's research methodologies, data management protocols, and regulatory compliance procedures. We scheduled a presentation for major investors and prepared a press release highlighting our commitment to transparency. Meanwhile, Jack's legal troubles continued to mount. The psychological evaluation had determined he was competent to stand trial, but noted concerning patterns of narcissistic behavior and inability to accept responsibility for his actions. The prosecutor had added additional charges of conspiracy to commit identity theft and attempted extortion based on documents found in his possession. Claire called with an update that brought the situation into even sharper focus. Jack's attorney has approached the DA about a plea deal. They're suggesting he has information about corporate malfeasance at Horizon that he'd be willing to share in exchange for leniency. Let me guess. Clinical trial data and regulatory shortcuts? I asked. Exactly. The DA is appropriately skeptical, especially given the comprehensive audit you've just completed. But they have to follow up on it. True to Claire's prediction, 2 FDA investigators arrived at Horizon the following week, requesting access to documentation for 3 specific clinical trials Jack had referenced in his claims. The legal team provided complete cooperation, confident in the integrity of our processes. After a thorough review, the investigators concluded their visit with no findings of misconduct. Jack's attempt to leverage false accusations had failed, further damaging his already precarious legal position. 6 months after the dramatic board meeting that had elevated me to COO, Horizon hosted an investor conference to unveil our 5-year strategic plan. The company had thrived under the new leadership structure, with Neurolex exceeding sales projections by 28% and operational efficiency metrics setting industry benchmarks. As I presented our vision for the future, focused on therapeutic innovation, operational excellence, and ethical leadership, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The journey from discovering Jack's betrayal to standing on this stage had been challenging, but it had revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. After the presentation, as investors and analysts mingled during the reception, Eleanor approached, with a distinguished-looking man I didn't recognize. Rebecca, I'd like you to meet William Chen, CEO of Pacific Biosciences. William, this is Rebecca Mitchell, the executive I was telling you about. As we shook hands, William smiled warmly. Eleanor speaks very highly of your leadership. Pacific is always looking for board members with your operational expertise. Would you be open to discussing the possibility? The offer took me by surprise. Pacific Biosciences was one of the largest pharmaceutical companies on the West Coast, and a board position would represent a significant career advancement. I'd be honored to discuss it, I replied, already thinking about how such a role could complement my position at Horizon while expanding my industry influence. That evening, as I drove home to my new condo in downtown Seattle, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed in just 6 months. The betrayal that should have destroyed me had instead propelled me toward greater success, independence, and self-knowledge. My phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system, Olivia calling to check in, as had become our daily routine since Jack's arrest. "How was the investor presentation?" she asked. "Better than expected. The 5-year plan was extremely well received, and I've been invited to consider a board position at Pacific Biosciences." "Look at you, corporate queen. And any word on the Jack situation?" "His trial date is set for next month, but his attorney is still pushing for a plea deal." Either way, the restraining order has been extended indefinitely, and he's looking at significant jail time plus restitution. Justice served, Olivia declared with satisfaction. Any regrets about how everything played out? I considered the question carefully as I navigated through evening traffic. Did I regret the end of my marriage? The public nature of Jack's downfall? The personal and professional upheaval of the past 6 months? No, I said finally. I regret that Jack wasn't the person I thought he was. I regret the years spent building a life with someone who could betray me so calculatingly. But I don't regret how I responded when I discovered the truth. That's my girl, Olivia replied proudly. Still coming over for dinner Sunday? I'm trying that new pasta recipe. Wouldn't miss it. After ending the call, I continued my drive, watching the Seattle skyline emerge through breaks in the clouds. The city looked different to me now, not just a backdrop to my life, but a landscape of possibility. Each glittering building represented potential, connection, opportunity. The final piece of the divorce settlement arrived the following week, a judicial ruling that officially terminated our marriage and divided the remaining assets according to the agreement Claire had negotiated. Jack's attempts to claim financial hardship due to his legal troubles had fallen flat, and the judge had upheld the original terms. I signed the documents in Claire's office, feeling a curious blend of closure and anticipation. The legal severing of ties to Jack represented not just the end of a relationship, but the beginning of a new chapter written entirely on my terms. How does it feel to be officially divorced? Claire asked as she witnessed my signature. Like setting down a heavy weight I didn't realize I was carrying, I admitted. Even with everything that's happened professionally, there was still this unfinished business hanging over me. Well, it's finished now. Jack will serve his sentence. You've secured your financial future, and Horizon is thriving under your leadership. I'd call that a successful outcome by any measure. As I left Claire's office, I decided to take the rest of the day off, something I rarely allowed myself. The early summer weather was perfect for walking, so I strolled through Olympic Sculpture Park, watching ferries cross Elliott Bay against the backdrop of the Olympic Mountains. My phone buzzed with an email notification from Daniel. The subject line read simply, "When you're ready." The message contained a single paragraph. The board has unanimously agreed that you should be named CEO when I retire next year. No need to respond immediately. Take some time to consider what this would mean for your long-term goals. But know that the opportunity is yours if you want it. I sat on a park bench, letting the news sink in. From the brink of financial devastation to the threshold of corporate leadership in less than a year. The journey had been neither planned nor expected, but it had revealed capacities within me that might otherwise have remained dormant. That evening, I invited Olivia and Claire to dinner at my condo to share the news and celebrate this latest development. As we raised our glasses in a toast, I felt a surge of gratitude for these women who had stood beside me through the darkest moments and now shared in the brightest ones. To Rebecca, Olivia declared, who turned betrayal into triumph. To resilience, Claire added, and the power of strategic thinking. To new beginnings, I finished, and the unexpected paths that lead us to them. Later, after my friends had left and I stood alone on my balcony watching the city lights, I thought about the twists and turns that had brought me to this moment. The promotion party that should have been a celebration, but became a revelation. The husband who thought he was orchestrating my downfall, but catalyzed my rise. The professional opportunity that transformed a personal crisis into a platform for leadership. Life rarely followed a linear path. It zigzagged through joy and pain, success and failure, connection and loss. The true measure of character wasn't in avoiding these fluctuations, but in how we navigated them, whether we allowed ourselves to be defined by what happened to us or by how we chose to respond. Jack had made his choice, plotting what he believed would be the perfect exit from our marriage. securing his professional advancement at the cost of my financial security. But in doing so, he had inadvertently set in motion a sequence of events that would redefine both our futures in ways neither of us could have anticipated. I hadn't sought revenge, merely justice. Yet the universe had its own sense of poetic symmetry. The position Jack had coveted, the power he had pursued, the success he had prioritized above all else, these had come to me not because I had schemed for them, but because I had proven myself worthy of them. As I turned to go inside, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Opening it, I found a simple message. "Congratulations on the CEO news. You've earned it. M. Melissa." I hadn't heard from her since her warning about Jack's scorched earth plan. The charges against her had been reduced in exchange for her cooperation, and last I'd heard, she was working on rebuilding her life in California. I considered whether to respond, weighing the complex emotions her message evoked. In the end, I simply replied, "Thank you. I wish you well." It wasn't forgiveness exactly. The calculated betrayal had cut too deep for that. But it was an acknowledgement that all of us were capable of both terrible mistakes and genuine growth. Melissa had made choices she couldn't undo, but her eventual cooperation had helped prevent further damage. 1 year to the day after my promotion party, I hosted a different kind of gathering, a celebration of Horizon's record-breaking fiscal year, with Neurolex now the market leader in its category and 2 promising new therapies advancing through clinical trials. The company had transformed under my leadership, embracing a culture of collaboration, innovation, and ethical practice that had attracted top talent and earned industry recognition. The board's decision to name me CEO designate had been made public, triggering a surge in stock price and positive analyst coverage. As I stood at the podium addressing the assembled employees, investors, and industry partners, I felt a sense of rightness, not just professional satisfaction, but a deeper alignment between my values and my work. A year ago, I couldn't have predicted standing here today, I told the audience. Life rarely follows our carefully constructed plans. Sometimes it disrupts them entirely, forcing us to rebuild from unexpected foundations. I scanned the room, meeting the eyes of my leadership team, each one chosen for their expertise, integrity, and commitment to our shared vision. But what matters isn't the disruption, it's the response. Do we retreat or do we advance? Do we surrender to circumstances or do we transform them into opportunities? The room was silent, attentive. These weren't just corporate platitudes. They were hard-won insights from a journey that had tested every aspect of my character and capacity. At Horizon, we've chosen to advance, to innovate, to lead not just in what we create, but in how we create it. That commitment defines us more than any product or profit margin. As applause filled the room, I felt the weight of the past year lift completely. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy me had become merely a chapter in a much larger story, one that I continued to write with each decision, each relationship, each step forward. Jack's name no longer appeared in headlines. His actions no longer dominated my thoughts. His betrayal no longer shaped my choices. He had become what he had always feared most, irrelevant. And I had become what I had always been capable of being, resilient, strategic, and entirely my own person. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.